Yeah.
I'm actually, there's a seat there. Probably coming down.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to have dinner there? Do you want to have dinner? See how you feel. Might just make life easy. This thing hasn't started yet. Turn my
Everyone online, please make sure that you are muted. We will start in 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you.
welcome. Thank you also for your patience. We didn't have enough chairs because maybe not everyone registered, but we are very, very happy to have everyone here. Even if you didn't register, that's fine. There's going to be a bit of a Hunger Games situation when the food comes, but we'll deal with it later. Okay, so my name is Ana Vilaconcejo. I am the co-director, together with Eleanor Bruce, who's arriving a bit later, of the MSI. The MSI is the Marine Studies Institute at the University of Sydney. It aggregates all researchers with a focus on oceans. Thank you for being here. I hope that you all are members. If you're not, please join. There will be a QR code in the end. And thank you for your support. So before we start, I need to pass to the next slide. No. Okay, here. Okay, so before we start, I want to acknowledge that we are in traditional Aboriginal land. This land has never been ceded. And so I want to recognize and pay respect to the elders and communities, past, present, and emerging of the lands that the University of Sydney campuses stand on. For thousands of years, this is, I think, is the oldest communities on Earth, have shared and exchanged knowledges across innumerable generations for the benefit of all. So let's acknowledge that. And now I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Claire Raymond. She's our host today. She has coordinated organizing this. Dr. Claire Raymond is a marine paleoecologist whose research has contributed to the understanding of how climate change and local stressors shape coral reef ecosystems. She has a focus on sustainability and environmental justice, and she has been super kind to volunteer her time to organize this event today. So thank you very much, Claire. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. We'll move to our fantastic panelists here. I'd just like to introduce the three we have here, and then we have one virtually. Emily Jatef in the middle is the Senior Curator of the Maritime Senior Curator of the Maritime Trade and Industry at the Australian National Maritime Museum. And she also leads the Ocean Futures Program. I have to say, it's been a task to try to summarize the achievement of our panelists because they're just so fantastic. I have to say, I'm completely humbled that they all accepted the invitation to join the panel. We've also got right here, Dr. Jodie Smith, who is the head of Oceans, Reefs, Coast and the Arctic branch of Geoscience Australia. She also leads national initiatives in marine science and governance. She has experience spanned in Antarctic expeditions and ocean mapping, and is also on a lot of policy advisory roles. Also at the end here, we have Mitch Gibbs, who is filling in for Bryce. Mitch is also a representative for the Gamma Rangers, would you say?
Oh, no.
No. No. Well, he has very close ties and works very closely with the Gamma Rangers, and is a lecturer here at the School of Geosciences, and sort of works in the intersection of traditional knowledge and marine science. Yeah. Also virtually, we have Dr. Roger Beeden from Townsville, Queensland. He is the Chief Scientist at the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, and he has more than 20 years experience in reef management and stewardship. His work focuses on climate change, reef interventions, and building collaborations to protect the reef's future. So as you can see, it's a very impressive panel we have today. So with that said, we'll dive in and I'll start asking the panelists their thoughts on some really pressing issues in marine governance at the moment. I might actually start with Roger Beeden. Mainly because this year it's the 50th anniversary of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Act of 1975. And at the time it was a world-leading legislation. And looking back over the last 50 years, Roger, what do you see as the most significant achievements and lessons learnt from governing the reef?
Thanks, everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. I'm not sure whether you can see me. So, yeah, I'm somewhere behind in one of those screens and a bit of technology. Well, look, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. I mean, it is a really sort of honour to sort of do the job that I do, sort of, and stand on the shoulders of giants who've been working on looking after this amazing place of the Great Barrier Reef for the last 50 years. I'd say that the legislation is still world leading in terms of how it's prioritised protection above all else. I mean, it has several objects of the Act that governs how we manage the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. And the first of those takes primacy over everything else. And so it is about the long-term protection. And then it makes provision for multiple use. Just to give you some key stats, you know, don't forget it's truly vast. I mean, it's actually ridiculously big in some ways. It's made up of 3,000 individual reefs and 900 islands. It's bigger than Italy, 450 coral species, 1,500 species of fish. I mean, the list goes on. But the reason why it's really important is because it's like all other coral reef ecosystems, and it represents about 10% of the world's coral reef ecosystems, but they support about 25% of marine biodiversity. So the fact that it has legislation and it was put in place because there was discussion about mining in the area when the first campaigns were put in place to protect the reef. That then established the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Act and Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. And then in 1981, it was listed as a World Heritage Area by the World Heritage Committee for all 4 natural criteria. And I'd say, again, the reason why I'm saying that this legislation is still world leading is actually a lot of what's happened since then. So things like increasing the amount of no-take area in the marine park from 5 to 33% in 2004. That's sort of seen as gold standard and underpins a lot of the global viewpoint about the fact that we need to protect 30% of the world's natural habitats by 2030. So I think the other thing to say is that those kind of decisions that sit under that legislation, they're difficult. Conservation decisions are difficult because they typically involve telling people that they can't do something that they were doing in a place that they potentially like to go to. But that we now have work that shows that kind of those decisions have paid dividends for everyone. So we see greater resilience to impacts in the areas that have no take. We see reductions in crown-of-thorn starfish outbreaks, and we actually see more fish that are actually been spilling over from the fully protected areas into other areas that allow people to fish. So I think overall the critical lesson for governance is that it needs strong science underpinnings. It needs to continuously adapt, and that's particularly important given a changing climate, and it needs to be inclusive.
Nice answer. Yeah. This probably brings me towards maybe something that Jody works on in mapping, seafloor mapping, and yeah, how does accurate mapping help influence Australia's ocean governance?
Thanks, Claire. So yeah, so at Geoscience Australia, we act as the national coordinator for seabed mapping around Australia. The reason why that is important is it gives us kind of a common operating picture. If we have consistent maps of the seabed, then everybody knows what's there and can make informed decisions about how best to use the marine environment. But our marine estate is vast. We have one of the largest in the world. We have the third largest marine jurisdiction. And so coordination is really important so that we're not duplicating efforts and that we're focusing in on the areas of highest importance. So when it comes to ocean governance, it's all, and Roger touched on this, it's all about having the scientific evidence to make those informed decisions. And seabed mapping information is one of the critical inputs to that. It's not the only input, but it is one of the inputs into things like all the oceanographic modelling and, you know, understanding marine heat waves, for example. You need to understand the movement of currents and they're affected by the shape of the seabed. So it kind of feeds into a lot of other areas of science as that foundation layer. And it's really important for making decisions. For example, at the moment, we're doing a lot of work in related to offshore wind and the development of an offshore wind area industry in Australia. And you can't just put offshore wind anywhere. Obviously, the wind environment is one of the critical factors, but you've also got to put the turbines somewhere and they get anchored to the seabed. So understanding the dynamics of the seabed, the stability of the seabed, what lives on the seabed, the benthic habitats, but also the migration of species through the area. So it's all very interconnected, and seabed mapping is one of the critical pieces of information that feeds into decisions about the ocean and ocean governance. And to the point where at the recent United Nations Oceans Conference earlier this year, the Australian government committed to enhancing seabed mapping in Australia and contributing to global efforts. There was a call to action for seabed mapping and Australia actually made a commitment under that. So it's nice to see that it is recognised by the Australian government as being important.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement in space in terms of policy and mapping, a lot. And maybe this can also lead into something you can give us insight onto, Mitch, by walking us through maybe some of the processes of traditional ocean governance and Indigenous approaches to caring for sea country.
The policy around it, or just general practices?
Just general practices, just general, the processes in which, of what you know, walk us through some of the mechanisms in which Indigenous communities govern their sea country.
Well, I guess to start with, the first thing you need to consider is that the relationship between people and place is such an important one. When you start looking at, as an example, you start thinking about how people relate to that place. That it's not a place that is just there. It's part of their family. Like the rivers, the ocean, the animals, the winds, all have a place within the culture. And so when thinking about what that means is that we always have to look at how that interacts and with everything else. So as an example, when we start thinking about management practices, there used to be practices, and I'm sure a lot of people heard of the law of the tongue that was down in Eden. And so those practices were done in a method that was reciprocal between the environment and the people. So law of the tongue is where orcas would help the community harpoon humpback whales. And obviously it's not very good for the humpback whales, but the orcas and the people obviously had a good time with it.
Is this law of the tongue in terms of storytelling or sharing the tongue of the
I'll
whale?
get there. So what would happen is that the orcas would help them, but that reciprocal relationship was that once the humpback whale had been killed, the humpback whale would be left in the water for about 2 days, and the orcas would come in and eat the tongue. It was the delicacy for the orcas. They would also eat the lips and the genitals. It's the thin skin, apparently. So there was always that relationship between the animals and the people. And so making sure that when we're thinking about Indigenous practices for coastal management, we're not just thinking about one thing. We're thinking about the whole system as a whole and thinking about each individual part its interactions with everything else. So I often see now when we're talking about habitat restoration, we always think about, oh, let's put some oyster reefs in. And great, oyster reefs are really good. They're good at cleaning. They're good at forming a structure. But if we keep putting in the same thing over and over and over again, habitat complexity and biodiversity just diminishes. And so it's great saying that we can clean the environment, but at what cost? And so instead of having a perspective of one thing being, or one question and then having one answer, we need to start by thinking about the whole system as a basis and think, yes, we need to clean it, but we also need to do other things at once, not just the one thing.
So have more of a holistic approach to conservation and management.
And be part of the equation. One of the major differences between Indigenous knowledges and Western science is that humans seem to take themselves out of the equation and say, well, we've done this, but like as an example, I did my PhD on oysters. I took them out of the water, and then it was like let them into a hatchery for 2 weeks, and then after that, I was like, oh, nothing's wrong with them now. It's like, no, I still took them out of the water. Like something has obviously happened. They're not going to be the same as what they were beforehand. So I still obviously played a role. And Indigenous knowledge systems, we know that. We know that whatever role we're playing, it is a role.
I think this is a nice leader into Emily's work in at the museum and how you see storytelling and cultural narratives shaping the future ocean management and conservation and our stewardship and connection with the ocean.
Big question.
Yeah. No,
Oh, no, I mean, obviously storytelling is massively important. I mean, it can reveal tensions and resonances between competing narratives. It can help people bring stakeholders together, you know, if done right, for mutual understanding, fostering mutual understanding, or, you know, finding common ground. But, you know, storytelling can be as dangerous as it can be useful. You know, you can fact, you can do opinion dressed up as fact. And that happens a heck of a lot. So you have to be really obviously careful and correct with your storytelling. I think, you know, it's like all things like my boss, I was just talking to him on the phone, and he said, you know, he said, you're not corrupt. Because we were talking about something, and I was like, "Oh, great! Yes, I am not corrupt." And I think that's it, right? With your storytelling is to always really be honest with your words. But I think the important thing at the Maritime Museum that we have done recently is we signed on for a 10-year program in support of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So that was a big commitment as an organization to say that across our entire suite of programs, education, exhibitions, public programs, blah, 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 the whole thing, online, offsite, that we would commit to contemporary ocean storytelling with international, national, and regional audiences, with the aim to be a bridge between government, industry, and science and the public. So for us, that's, you know, it goes year on year, it changes, it flows, it grows, as most things do. But like Mitch said, we take that human ocean relationship very, very strongly, and, you know, forming an emotional connection to the ocean, or often emotional beings, and then ensuring that we profile and platform diverse voices for holistic and rights-based governance. So, you know, it's kind of my summation.
Yeah, that's a big answer as well. And it's also the work that you're doing in terms of engaging with researchers, engaging with the public. How
That's question 2. That's my answer to question 2.
that's
Come on, don't move ahead.
yeah, it's I guess that's a question for all of you. How best researchers, early career researchers, senior researchers, the general public can engage with all of these organizations to provide information to help somehow in this effort, this united effort between organizations. This is an open for anyone, Roger, Jody, anyone, even in the audience, if someone wants to answer that one. Yeah, go.
I'll just say, not on behalf, but just generally speaking, Indigenous communities are very, very excited and happy to share information and knowledge. The problem that we often see within the academic space, and it happens in government and industry as well, but especially in academia, we see a lot of opportunistic people going in saying that we want to do what's right for you. They take knowledge, don't give respect and acknowledgement to where that's from, and then Indigenous communities don't really then feel like sharing anymore. But if you make a relationship, just as researchers do with other researchers, it's the same thing. Like, let's say Maria and I have worked together for a very long time, and we have a very good relationship. And I don't know, we chat on the phone. I don't know, she has a Christmas party at her place every year, and things, having a relationship, it doesn't change just because it's out of the academic space. And so instead of being the same way that we've always been in academia, we need to make sure that we're forming relationships instead of just having transactional bonds.
Yeah, that's really important. Those long-term sort of relationships and working together. That's nice. Any other comments from the panelists?
I'm happy to jump in. So I guess I work very much in the applied science space. Our role is really to do the science that is needed to inform government policy. And so I'm only going to speak about that. I'm not talking about sort of the blue sky research stuff here. But if you're interested in doing research that has impact on something that is important to the government, being able to translate across that science policy divide is a critical skill set. Unfortunately, people in government don't read academic papers, but they do read things like, summaries and those sorts of things. So learning how to communicate is really important, but also talking to them and building those relationships and understand what problem they're trying to solve and making sure that your research targets to that. So if you're writing a proposal, for example, for a grant that you want to have impact on some kind of government policy, look at the most recent policy documents. They're all available on the internet. Go to the biggest challenge is that in Australia, there is no central place for ocean policy and governance. There's something like 23 portfolios at the Commonwealth level that have some kind of an interest in the oceans, whether it's fisheries, whether it's submarine cables, whether it's marine parks. So there's no central place for it. So the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water kind of take a bit of a coordination role, and they've been leading the development of Australia's Sustainable Ocean Plan. But being able to point your research to how it's going to help inform those types of documents is a really good way of making sure that your science has impact and will be taken up in things that, the government decision-making process. So yeah, if you're interested in working in that space, go to invite the policy people to your science conferences. I went to the Australian Marine Science Association conference in July, and I hadn't been for a few years. It used to be a very research-focused conference, and the big shift that I noticed was that there was people from government, all over government. There was Indigenous groups there, all freezing because they'd come down from Darwin and they were stuck in Melbourne in winter. But the diversity of voices made the conference so much better. And I think it gave the researchers a bit more direction in how they could actually apply their research. So if you are planning events, make sure you invite policy people along.
Yeah, here.
Just like Claire did.
No, that's a really good point. Also, to how there are so many policies and acts, and that there's this one hub for coordination as well. Because Australia has one of the largest marine jurisdictions in the world, the third, I think, third largest. Yeah.
I think we have.
I was just going to build on that point, because I think it's really important that, I think working in this, I do actually read academic papers, but I agree most people don't in the government space. So but helping government officers to actually work out what the question is. So we often, that especially as we see a changing climate, is critically important. I always quite like the distinction between the words limited and limiting knowledge. But there's limited knowledge out there about all sorts of things. But the bit you want to hone in on is what's limiting our ability to put in place an action, whatever that might be in the policy space. And working with people in government agencies, you'll find them, you know, coming over the fence to try and help do that. I mean, by the science community is actually really, really helpful. I've certainly experienced some really good examples where that's really improved the outcomes.
Yeah, definitely this collaboration of knowledge and experiences. Yeah.
I would probably go in the opposite direction about what you can do for me, which is that, you know, as an organization and as an outreach center, the area where we are brilliant with connecting with families and schools and people over 50, 55, but young adults, we, you know, you don't go to a maritime museum for fun often, do you? Right. So what would get you there? You know, what kind of programs within the ocean space? You know, thinking about things like that, you can actually through Claire connect to me, and we're really interested in supporting that. We also put student research. We install it at the Maritime Museum. You know, we've got some light traps going in soon, biofouling experiments, things like that, you know, but it's really good training for translating your research to the public, because everyone thinks they can do it and not everybody can, but everybody can once they learn how.
I was just going to blatantly say they also have a boat now. a research boat, not just a...
And not just a dinghy.
Not just a dinghy.
Come use our hot little red boat on Sydney Harbour. Yeah.
Look out for it. Look out for it. But,
I think I might put a little document together asking for proposals to use the little red boat.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you need a reviewer for that.
Committee sorted? All right, let's go.
Maybe back to you, Roger, as well. Like you gave us a really nice explanation of the last 50 years since the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Act was instated. What do you see for the future? What would you love to see happen in the next 50 years with reef management?
Well, look, I mean, I think that, you know, the spectre of climate change is such a big pervading matter that the short answer is that we need to work out how to adapt both the existing management and draw upon new innovations, draw upon people's creativity to work out what we're going to do. The patterns of the past are not going to be sufficient to help us make sure we can navigate into the future. I've always quite liked, there's a quote from a paper by Eddie Gain from the Nature Conservancy, which is that conservation isn't rocket science, it's far more complex. And I mean, you know, what we're dealing with is truly wicked problems, wicked complex problems. And that requires a quite a different approach to sort of tackle it well. You know, the uncertainty around climate makes things really tricky from a policy perspective. You know, how things like the Great Barrier Reef, I mean, it becomes a bit of a poster child because it's so vulnerable, and coral reefs are around the world. But, you know, reefs used to fix themselves and provide services for free, and they're not able to do that as well at the moment, and certainly into the future. And so, and then there's other wicked part of the problem is that you won't know that you've breached tipping points until you've gone past them. So I think that to the sort of more positive perspective on that is, you know, we have to really make sure that we're able to draw upon the wealth of knowledge, the wisdom of crowds from all the people in that room and elsewhere to learn from overseas. And we spend a lot of time collaborating because that's really essential to do, both to share what we know as well as to learn from others. I think that the main part of that is that we do have some insights into what things matter for coral reef ecosystems and for other marine and other ecosystems. We understand about things like ecosystem resilience, which I think is probably just a sort of Western description of what traditional owners have been talking about as holistic sea country for a long time, since, you know, before the modern Great Barrier Reef existed. And then we've got really good examples of some of the things that have worked so far. I touched on a few of them, but, you know, even simple, relatively simple pieces of science like working out how you can effectively control crown of thorn starfish has made a big difference to the recovery trajectory of the reef in recent years. Now, those things on their own are not going to be enough, but bringing those innovations together, enabling the governance to take those on, that we need to adapt in terms of the policy space as well as new innovations. That's going to be critical for the next 50 years. But we also can't sugarcoat it. I mean, there's a really important need to sustain hope, but at the same time, that hope needs to be realistic. If you don't, just saying it's all fine, which some quarters of some people might like to say, clearly is not the case. But at the same time, all of our actions matter. What we do as individuals, whether it's about mitigation, whether it's about protecting resilience, whether it's up in the part of the world that I'm in or remotely, matters to what the future of these amazing resources actually going to be. So, I mean, I think overall there are many challenges, but there are also many opportunities. And I'd sort of finish that by saying, human history is one of overcoming adversity with incredible creativity, and that's certainly what gives me some hope about the future.
No, absolutely. Like, you definitely need, especially in this climate, need to bring hope and positivity to what we do that is actually going to improve the health of the ocean from a holistic point of view. And it does take many people and many good examples of when it did work, when management and conservation worked, and when it hasn't worked as well, which I think we've all seen examples of. And yeah, Jody, actually, do you have any good examples of like regulatory examples from Geoscience Australia when it's been sort of worked really well?
Yeah, so I touched on this earlier. The development of the offshore wind industry is obviously a bit of a hot topic in the oceans at the moment in Australia, but it has been in development for quite some time, and it has been a process where it has required governance across government, but it has also required a strong public consultation element to it. And so we've been involved in both sides of that. So to start with, they declared areas of potential offshore wind, and that involved getting those 23 portfolios across government that I talked about, getting them all together to share the boundaries of those declared areas and look at all of the other rights, restrictions, uses in the ocean and adjacent along the coast to understand if we are to make this area for offshore wind, how is that going to interact with other things? And so there was a whole government consultation process that happened, and everybody came along with their, well, I care about this bit and I care about this bit. And we used the Australian Marine Spatial Information System, which is a visualisation of all of the rights, restrictions, uses in the ocean, that Geoscience Australia manages, and it has all the layers of all the different interests. So you could see if you draw the boundary of the offshore wind, what is it going to interact with? What is it going to compete with? And based on the government consultation, the areas actually got adjusted because there were submarine cables, or there were orange-bellied parrots that had a protected fly path. So they basically adjusted the boundaries to fit in with all of the government consultation feedback. They then went through a public consultation process where they put out the proposed declared areas for public consultation and held information sessions out in the communities. And again, we participated in that and used AMSIS as a way to visualise and communicate with the public when they don't understand the details of the regulation of boundaries and all that kind of stuff. But if you show it to them on a computer screen and go, here's the polygon and here's all the other stuff going on in your local area, and it actually really helped with that communication and translation piece. And again, the public put in submissions, the areas got revised again, and before they got declared, the areas from what was originally proposed to government to what was finally declared by the Minister for Climate Change was quite different, quite a lot smaller. But I guess the mechanisms around the governance of how it all works allowed for people to have their input and yet still come up with an outcome where there is now an area where the industry can apply for licenses and that. So I would say that was one of the effective mechanisms. And for us, being able to share the data in a way that people who are not, experts in geographic information systems, for example, or understanding the technicalities of boundaries of things in the oceans, it allowed them to engage with the information without having to understand the technical detail.
Yeah, it seems like quite a long and in-depth process. And it also sounds like there's a lot of trade-offs possibly with, what is valued. And that's also to do with a lot with the mapping and all the consultations. Following on from that, Mitch, would you suggest any perhaps good ways in which, like, how you would envisage more sort of traditional knowledge being incorporated into higher level decision making?
Yeah,
Sort of coordination of that?
Yeah, so I think this to start with, one of the things that I think needs to change is the idea of fishing. Fishing generally in a Western lens is seen as just taking, whereas in an Indigenous context, a fishing practice is the cultivation and the harvesting. And like we have Indigenous fishing rights in Australia where, yeah, I can go out and do fishing, but that only relates to the Western sense of fishing and not the cultivation side. And people, like even today out at La Perouse, where like they want to be able to do their own practices, but there's so many permits and so much legalities that they need to go through to be able to do that. They also want to teach people these processes and techniques as well. And then again, there's so many legalities around it that even before, it was only a couple of years ago, but if non-Indigenous people were doing their fishing practices, they would get fined. Whereas the Indigenous community wants to share that knowledge. They want to be able to teach people the same things that they're seeing so then they can share it with other people, which means that it's not just a secular area of knowledge, but many people can do it and many people can share that with other people. So I think the legalities mostly around what fishing is, I think need to really change. And then being able to incorporate Indigenous practices, whether it's cultivation and harvesting together, I think will make much bigger changes.
So it's a lot, also the mindset of what we're doing, like being very mindful of the practice, the governance, the reasoning behind it, and the restorative aspect of it. It's not, as you're saying, it's not just taking, but it's cultivating.
Well, it's like seeing everything together. Like you look at like the middens that are on the coasts, and people just see them as, I guess, a tip of refuse. But those places taught and still teach the seasonality of things, what should be there, what shouldn't be there, how much has been taken out. And then from that, should the cultivation start or should you be going to harvesting? All of that is the fishing practice. All of that around the knowledge, all of that comes together to be fishing, not just putting a line in the water and taking a fish out.
It's the whole process.
Yeah, the sharing of knowledge, the understanding of the environment, the seeing of seasons, the knowing of what should be there and what shouldn't be there. Everything together is a fishing practice, not just.
Not just take. But maybe that's also, maybe Emily, you can share like a standout moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so excited that you're talking about offshore energy, really. You know, this I think it's really, really interesting. And you know, to hear about all the layers of, I'm sorry, I'm only segueing briefly. But all the layers of work that you did and you continue to do, and how some storytelling punches holes in that whole process that can be very, very difficult to repair. So things like offshore energy, and it's tough because you put so much time and knowledge, and then translating that to the public, and then one news article, boom, and it's gone, you know, years of work. So that is the power of storytelling. I think stand out. Oh, am I falling off? Oh, thanks. One standout moment. Well, like, people really care about plastics. We did a big ocean literacy survey. It's in one of our exhibitions, Ocean Photographer of the Year. We asked people a question about the ocean, and we had 8,000 responses. It was great. I mean, half of them were, drawings of genitalia, but the ones that matter. Yeah, sorry. The ones that matter, there are some really detailed questions from people. They're like 70% are from kids, but most are either, I love the ocean, or plastics are bad. And so, you look at that, and I had a wonderful student who was doing the research on this project, and I thought, okay, well, I can take this in two ways. And obviously this is, Emily's hypothesis about how best to use it. But one was, plastics. Obviously, people care deeply about plastics. So we have this great relationship with the Seabin Foundation. So we supported their first splashdown of a bin, and I'm sorry for that, in 2018. It's a really lovely, bright yellow garbage can that's in the water, sucks plastic in via vacuum. Very easy for everyone to understand. You can put them anywhere at entry points where rubbish is flowing into the water. Worked with Seabin for a couple of years. Then they had an ocean lab where they wanted to be able to process 24/7 all of the material that they recover from the 32 bins around Sydney Harbour, and then use those data to share them with the public. Well, obviously, that should be at the Maritime Museum. So because that gives people a really active look into the plastics problem. It's not just like, here are 10 things you can do at home, which if I hear one more time, I'm going to garrote myself. Not that you shouldn't all do those things at home, but can we move beyond it? That's all. I think we all have, right? And so that's one I'm really proud of, that people can go on tours of the lab and they can actually understand what rubbish is in Sydney Harbour, and how interesting is it that like Vivid, oh boy, rubbish goes through the roof during Vivid. So this year we're working with Vivid to put up signs so that we can tell people, hey, this is the impact last year. So that one I'm really happy about, and I can't remember the other one right now. I've spoken enough.
Well, on the whole rubbish side, and I don't know if anyone would agree with me, but I also think that, like, when we're looking at fireworks for New Year's, I reckon we should go to drones or something like that instead of pumping fireworks into the sky and into the water. But
You see the main drone show that's replaced the fireworks?
the lame one.
Drone company.
I don't come down to the city at night. I remembered my other one. I remembered my other one. I'll be really, really quick. But so the other thing that people, when in reading those cards, I was like, oh, the one thing people don't understand is how the ocean works. Ocean conditions, right? Technology, how we study, how we understand the ocean. How do we make that interesting? So we thought, shoot, okay, we'll develop this exhibition that has one simple message. The ocean has 5 zones. I know that's oversimplifying the heck out of it, but there are 5 zones in the ocean: sunlight, twilight, midnight, abyss, hadal zone, and then each zone just has 2 objects in it, 2 objects that we use, that you guys use to explore, and what lives there, what's the environment like, very simple questions. And people actually like it, even though it's just like basically a tech exhibition. We've had over a million people through since it opened. So, so that's it.
That's it. Well, Elaine, I think you did a great job for the segue into opening it up for the audience to ask some questions to any of our panelists here. If anyone, we do have, maybe if I can grab one microphone, we can just put your hand up and Lucia will bring you the microphone. Don't be shy. Everyone's friends here. Yes.
Thank you to our panelists. Hi, I'm Natalie Pearson. I'm from the University of Sydney. My question is about the 30 by 30, thinking about how it applies to land and its impact on humans and the communities that we need to be aware of if we're turning a space into a conservation area. who are the communities that we need to be aware of in the ocean realm in the quest for 3030?
But I think, and Roger and I have spoken about this before, where people seem to separate the land to the water, and like the amount of runoff that comes from the Great Barrier Reef basin and into there is phenomenal, but not in a good way. And so I think everyone's a stakeholder. Everyone should have agency, and everyone should have a voice on the ocean, because yeah, you could live, I don't know, further into New South Wales, but it's still going to affect you. Like, so, and like all those farmlands, they're playing a major role in the destruction of some of the, a lot of the ecosystems. They mightn't have had the education to understand why that's actually happening or what the cause of that is. So I think we need to take it away from land and sea and just have it as one system, which it is, but we need to start looking at it like that.
There's 23 agencies going to manage that.
I might just add to that. So you stand on the beach and you look out and you see the blue ocean and you think it's empty, right? There's not much going out. You guys might see some ships go past. You live near a port. But there is actually a lot of activity around Australia's oceans. And you may be familiar, every year the Australian Institute of Marine Science release their Index of Marine Industry, and it actually shows how much marine or Australia's oceans are contributing to our economy each year, and it keeps going up and up. But it also breaks it down into sector. And so if you're talking about communities, like that would be my starting point in terms of, well, these are all the different sectors. There's fishing, there's shipping, there's the tourism industry, particularly up on places like the Great Barrier Reef. And they're all communities that are going to be affected by decisions around 30 by 30. So, and that's not including the general public who like doing their own recreation. So this is just a pure industry perspective, but the diversity is out there. And yeah, but I fully support your point. This separation between land and oceans as two separate things is, I think those days are over, hopefully. And we really need to take that holistic ecosystem perspective because it is interconnected in so many ways.
I can be really biased and say Indigenous communities, but every community is going to be affected by it. So, and as I said, that's up into the basins, that's out onto the islands, that's everywhere. So,
it's very simple, but just from a storytelling, like freshwater and saltwater, we always separate. Like we get yelled at all the time for not telling enough riverland stories. And we absolutely should. That's a much smaller scale. Oh, I don't have to give this to Roger.
It's all yours, Roger.
Thank you. I'm not sure it's directly answering the question, but I mean, I feel like it's tricky for people to understand why protecting 30% is the right answer. And again, I think that looking to some of the long-term, I mean, there's great examples, obviously, in the backyard that I'm having to be part of. You know, by protecting 30%, we've ended up with half the fish that are now caught in the Great Barrier Reef were actually born in the areas that are not open to fishing. So there's a direct flow on benefit. It's like a superannuation scheme. So convincing whether it's coastal communities of whatever a background or whether it's traditional owners, etc., highlighting to people that this investment in conservation is actually in everybody's interest. And as another example, you know, one of the reasons why coral reef ecosystems are seen as being really important around the world is coastal protection. You know, the middle word of Great Barrier Reef, there's a reason there's no surf when you go north of town of 1770. And that's not just a curiosity, it's actually that barrier reef is protecting the whole of the Queensland coastline from storm damage when we have severe tropical cyclones, etc. So it doesn't matter which community it is, there are benefits of protecting, you know, that kind of amount. And the 30% figure is roughly because we've got good evidence that that's the kind of amount that you need if you want to have intactness of these systems. So I'm not sure that it's any one individual community, but I do think we need to do a better job of, you know, helping people understand why, though, that's an important thing for them, even if they don't happen to live beside the areas that are going to be protected.
I might say one small thing following on from that that you reminded me of. So David Attenborough's documentary Ocean, which came out, and we showed as part of 23 maritime museums around the world, showed it for World Oceans Day. But it was fascinating. You know, that day we not only we had 800 people sign up for this thing, and it was the fastest sold out thing in the Maritime Museum's history. And when they were walking in, we were doing vox pops with the audience, and we said, "What's the biggest?" Yeah, because we're like that, you know, we're like total. And what do you think? What do you care about? And everyone on the way in was like, "I care about plastics," and everyone on the way out was like, "MPAs. I care about marine protected areas." So that, you know, but documentaries like Seaspiracy, which caused a lot of damage and thoughts within the sustainable fisheries community, but they have a massive impact on what people know.
Maria.
Hi, Roger. Great to see you and everyone here. I'd like to talk about the elephant in the room. It's climate change. Yeah. We can go 30 by 30 by 30, but how are we going to protect something in the face of changing climate? The Barrier Reef is a prime example of where things are going a bit pear-shaped with ocean warming and then of course in the land, the bushfires. It's not just, there's no lines on the ocean, there's no lines on the earth. The whole earth is affected by climate change. There was a very good article in The Conversation today about how the vested interests are spending billions in false information. And all the television ads with people sitting around the gas, barbecue, gas is part. I'm not bagging any particular area. It's just that I feel that we don't seem to have a good action to take it to this vested interests with, I think, false news in their own way. I mean, how do we get around that?
Hi, Maria. I'm sorry, I can only see the back of people's heads other than the panel, so I didn't realise it was yourself, but hello anyway. Look, I think your point's really well made. I would go back to the comment I made before about the thing about realistic hope. You know, all of the evidence that I've seen means that the actions that we take matter. I mean, but they will be overwhelmed if we don't mitigate. There's no question. I mean, it's very acute for things like the Great Barrier Reef and coral reefs because they're so vulnerable, but it's not like the other habitats aren't vulnerable as well. I mean, many are. So I think that how you have this balancing act between keeping people aware of what matters. You know, managing plastics is important. Is it as important as mitigating carbon dioxide? No, but at the same time, you know, ensuring that we maximize people's agency to take action is critical. And I think the other risk is that people then just switch off. If they feel hopeless, then there is a genuine risk that people won't want to engage and won't want to do things that do matter. But I mean, that doesn't mean I disagree with your point at all.
I think we have time for one more question. Any takers?
Can I just ask how many people in this room actually have hope? Raise your hand if you're hopeful. Hope. That's pretty good.
Yay.
Gives me hope.
Mitch, this question spawned out of your comments on the fishing industry and what a more sustainable fishing industry would look like. And going back to Jody, how you're talking about there's 23 different government agencies with vested interests in the ocean. And I think again and again, we've seen how policy change has often failed or taken too long to catch up with the times. Is there a space that you've seen in which educating the fishermen and women around these issues and possibly the benefits that they may gain, whether it's profit margins or more fish in the ocean, has that have you seen a difference in what that can make for the oceans, going for the private industry rather than relying on the government, which can often take time to get there?
Yes and no. Yes, there is a change if people. So, as an example, I was up in Wallace Lake working with 3 different stakeholder groups, which ended up becoming more, but you know how it goes. And to start with, we had oyster farmers, government, and Indigenous communities. But then quite quickly, because the whole thing was about environmental health, the health of the estuary, and how we can see that in the oysters. And then we obviously quite quickly realised that we can't really just have 3 stakeholders to then say that that's going to give us all the answers, because it's not. And one of the major things, and obviously all 3 areas are worried about runoff. And so we started talking to some farmers, and it wasn't about trying to say, look, you're going to lose money by doing this and whatever. It's just by being quite frank and saying, look, even just not fencing off and allowing cattle to go down and, I guess, just shitting all through the river and whatever, that all of that plays a role. And so a lot of times people don't see the ongoing effects. So they see what they see. They see that their cattle are going near the river. They might be drinking a bit of water, and great, they're eating some grass and getting fat. But they don't see what happens afterwards. And so even just being clear about that, people start to realize the impacts that they're having on the environment. And they see that personally. The reason why I also say no is because big business doesn't really give a shit about that. So yes, smaller companies and smaller groups are wanting to change and wanting to make good for the environment, but bigger business, as I said, doesn't care.
On that, oh,
No, I mean, I think big business doesn't care. It's just lovely. And
we can all like protest with our choices, our consumer choices, I guess. I just wanted to end. There will be plenty more time to chat with our panelists during afterwards, while we have some food and drinks. But I just wanted to give each of the panelists a minute or 2 for a final take-home message. If you have one, if you don't, that's fine. We can go straight to the drinks. But yeah, what would you like as a final?
So I think this touches on the most recent question, but I think a lot of what we've heard today. For me, communication is key. I think ocean literacy generally is poor, and that requires storytelling, but it also requires really clear communication to draw the interconnectedness between your farmers and your oyster farmers and your Indigenous groups and your government policy people. Communication is key. And I guess speaking to a bunch of people from a university, if the one thing you can learn while you are here is how to communicate your science, I think that is probably critical for me. I work with a lot of scientists from across government, academia, whatever, and to me, the biggest gap is communication.
Well, mine was bad. Mine was just like, think of your local museum differently. I feel like an ad, but no. Yeah, no, can I just say the same thing that you said, Jody? You know, honestly, it's true. You see, we were just at the National Marine Science Symposium, where they said they're developing the new National Marine Science Plan, right? And so there are white papers from all over, and everybody puts theirs in. And there was one, for the first time, there was one on ocean literacy, and we had one on cultural heritage. And we had, you know, the marine social science. And then at the end of the symposium, everyone in the room, all the major leaders in the room, they did a word cloud, and the biggest word cloud in the middle was ocean literacy. So obviously, this is something that all of your stakeholders, all the say, we need this. This is something all of us can deliver. So that's my takeaway.
I guess first thing I'll say is I'm sorry I'm not Bryce. And then the only other thing I'll say is that make meaningful relationships, don't be transactional.
Roger?
Thank you. I think that the bit that would always keep inspiring people is to get out into the environment. I mean, I always get a massive kick out of seeing somebody put their face in the water in a mask for the first time and look at the Great Barrier Reef. But I mean, I think that's true in so many environments. You know, it's really easy to be somewhat despondent about what's happening around us at the moment, but getting out into the environment is a really good antidote to that. And I think it's one of the things that keeps inspiration going. And then look for realistic hope. You know, what are those things that are making a difference? If you want to see a bit of it, go and look at rooftops from the air through Google Earth over the last, and how they've changed in the last 10 years in Australia. We now have 4 million households with solar. It's happening. That transition is happening. There is hope. And I think, you know, I just happen to be fortunate enough to be part of the group of people that happens to showcase that to many people around the world. So thanks.
Nice, nice. So we've got communication, literacy, relationships, and connection to nature as key in my mind's word cloud. But now I want to just wrap up this discussion and bring out Liav, the mighty Liav. She's a force of nature and helped immensely. I do have flowers for her, but they're on display outside.
Everyone gets to.
So everyone gets to appreciate them. It's recycling. But we also have gifts for all of you to thank you very much for your time and your experience and wisdom. Roger, we would have one for you, but we couldn't ship it up. Sorry.
It's all good.
You'll have to come down for the chocolates. You have to come to Sydney.
Done.
It is.
Oh, I like it.
Oh, you can have those. Oh, thank you.
Also, if you want to get in contact with any of these people, feel free to reach out to MSI and we can put you in contact with any of these people. These are also the QR codes to all the institutions. So that will take you directly to their website. Hope you all enjoyed the session today. I know I did, and thank you again.
That's too generous. I have to declare this. They can't go to meetings, sorry.
They are.